When my daughter shouted, "You will either serve my husband or get out of my house," I didn't respond in anger. Instead, I smiled, took my suitcase, and left, leaving behind the house I had paid for with my retirement savings. She was waiting for me to break down as usual. But this time, everything was different. A week later, I had 26 missed calls, and that was far from the end of my plan. They will regret their words and their actions. I'm Caleb Martinez, 62 years old, and I spent 35 years as an aerospace engineer at Lockheed Martin before retiring 2 years ago. My wife Melody passed away from cancer 3 years back, and since then, I've been living in the Scottsdale ranch house we'd bought together, trying to help my daughter Allie and her husband Bryce get on their feet. That help cost me more than I ever imagined it would. Looking back now, I can calculate it exactly. Allie's college at Arizona State cost me $28,000 per year for 4 years. $112,000 total. Her wedding in 2020 ran $22,000 because Bryce's family couldn't cover their half. The down payment on their house? $85,000 from my retirement account. Then came the monthly support that had been bleeding me dry for 5 years straight, $3,100 every month covering their mortgage, utilities, and groceries. That's $186,000 right there. Add it all up, and I'd invested $405,000 in their future, more than some people make in a decade. My keys were still warm in my palm when I pushed through the front door that Saturday afternoon, grocery bags cutting into my wrists. The Arizona sun blazed through the living room windows, casting everything in that harsh desert light that usually reminded me why Melody and I had moved here from Ohio after my retirement. Not today. Bryce was sprawled in my leather recliner, the one Melody had given me for my 60th birthday before the cancer took her. His work boots were propped up, a half-empty beer bottle dangling from his fingers. The remote control rested on his belly like he owned the place, which I suppose he thought he did after 5 years of living rent-free. Old man, he didn't even look up from the basketball game. Grab me another beer from the fridge while you're up. I set the grocery bags down slowly, feeling the weight of the milk cartons and bread loaves. The plastic handles had left red marks across my palms. Those groceries cost $127 this week, money I'd budgeted carefully from my Social Security check. Excuse me? You heard me. Bryce's eyes stayed fixed on the television screen. Corona. Not that cheap stuff you drink. Something cold. Something cold settled in my chest. I'd bought those Coronas specifically for him, just like I'd been doing for 5 years, spending my fixed income on beer I'd never touch because I wanted to keep the peace. Bryce, I just walked in. I need to put these groceries away. Now he looked at me. His face carried that familiar expression, the one that said I was being unreasonable, difficult, a burden in my own home. What's the big deal? You're already standing. I'm comfortable. The big deal is that this is my house. Bryce's feet hit the floor with a thud. He stood slowly, using his height advantage like a weapon. At 33, he was bigger than me, broader, but I'd been dealing with difficult people in corporate engineering meetings long before he was born. Your house? Funny, because your daughter and I live here. We pay the bills. I almost laughed at that. They paid bills? With what money? Bryce had been unemployed for 8 months, collecting unemployment while spending his days on sports betting websites. I knew because I'd seen the betting apps on his phone, heard him cursing at football games when his sure-thing bets didn't pan out. Details? He stepped closer, beer still in hand, using that intimidation tactic that probably worked on other people. Look, Caleb, we can do this the easy way or the hard way. You want to keep living here peacefully? You play ball. Simple as that. The kitchen door swung open. Allie appeared, her blonde hair pulled back in a messy ponytail, dish towel in her hands. She took in the scene, Bryce standing over me like some kind of alpha male, the tension thick enough to choke on. What's going on? Your father's being difficult, Bryce said without taking his eyes off me. I asked him to get me a beer, and he's making it into some kind of federal case. Allie looked at me with that disappointed expression I'd been seeing more often lately, like I was a child acting out instead of the man who'd raised her alone after her mother died, who'd sacrificed his retirement security to give her everything she wanted. Dad, just get him the beer. It's not worth fighting over. But Bryce wasn't done establishing his dominance. He moved closer, close enough that I could smell the alcohol on his breath. And it wasn't his first beer of the day. See, Caleb, here's how it's going to work from now on. You live in our house. You contribute. That means when I ask you to do something, you do it. No questions, no attitude, no discussions about whose name is on what piece of paper. Our house. I kept my voice level even though my heart was hammering with a mixture of anger and disbelief. That's right. Allie stepped beside her husband, presenting a united front against her own father. Dad, you need to decide right now. Either you help Bryce and do what he asks, or you can pack your things and leave. The words hung in the air like desert heat shimmers. I looked at my daughter, really looked at her, searching for any hint of the little girl who used to help me work on my 1969 Camaro in the garage, who brought me wildflowers she'd picked from our desert landscaping. Instead, I saw a stranger wearing her face, someone who could stand by while her unemployed, gambling-addicted husband treated her father like hired help. All right, I said quietly. Bryce smirked, thinking he'd finally put the old man in his place. Good. Now, about that beer. I'll pack. The smirk died on his face. Allie's mouth fell open slightly like she'd expected me to crumble, to apologize and shuffle to the kitchen like a beaten dog. That's what I'd been doing for 5 years. Backing down, keeping the peace, telling myself that family harmony was worth swallowing my pride. I turned toward the hallway, leaving the grocery bags where they sat. Behind me, I heard Bryce's sharp intake of breath. Allie's whispered, "Dad, wait." But I was already walking toward my bedroom, my footsteps steady on the tile floor Melody and I had chosen together 15 years ago. We'd picked those tiles during one of her good days between chemo treatments when she was still strong enough to dream about the future we'd have in this house. The suitcase came down from the closet shelf with a soft thump. I'd bought it for our 25th anniversary trip to Hawaii, back when Melody was still alive and the future stretched ahead like an open road. Now it gaped empty on the bed, waiting to swallow what remained of my life in this house. I packed methodically, the way I'd been trained in the Air Force, the way I'd approached every engineering project for 35 years. Underwear, socks, 3 changes of clothes. Not everything, just enough for what came next. From the living room came the low murmur of urgent whispers, Bryce's voice rising occasionally above Allie's softer tones. They were figuring out what to do, how to handle the old man's unexpected rebellion. My hands moved without conscious thought, folding shirts and rolling ties. The photo of Melody went into the side pocket, wrapped in tissue paper. The one from our wedding day, where she's laughing at something I'd whispered in her ear. She would have been horrified to see what our daughter had become. Someone who could choose a gambling addict over her own father. My medications went in next, then my reading glasses, the small leather journal where I tracked every expense. That journal told the real story of the past 5 years. Every $3,100 monthly transfer, every extra payment when they claimed an emergency, every sacrifice I'd made from my fixed income because I thought that's what good fathers did. When I wheeled the suitcase down the hallway, they stopped talking. Bryce had returned to his chair, but his posture was different now. Alert, watchful, maybe starting to realize that his meal ticket was walking out the door. Allie stood by the kitchen doorway, arms crossed, trying to look stern but failing to hide her uncertainty. "Dad, you're being ridiculous," she said as I reached the front door. "You can't just leave over something this stupid." I paused, my hand on the doorknob. Stupid? Your husband demanding I serve him like hired help in my own home is stupid? He didn't mean it like that. Yes, he did. I looked at her one last time, this daughter I'd raised alone after Melody died, who'd never wanted for anything because I'd made sure of it. And so did you when you backed him up instead of standing up for your father. Neither of them said goodbye. Maybe they thought I'd be back in a few hours, tail between my legs, ready to apologize for causing a scene. They'd seen me back down so many times before. The car started on the first try. My old Silverado, the truck I'd kept running for 12 years because I'd been too busy funding their lifestyle to buy myself something new. I backed out of the driveway without looking at the house, without seeing if they were watching from the window. The 20-minute drive to Desert Inn Motel gave me time to think, to remember how we'd gotten to this point. It hadn't happened overnight. Like most disasters, it had been a slow accumulation of small compromises, little surrenders of dignity that seemed reasonable at the time. It started when Allie graduated college in 2019. She'd gotten her engineering degree, the one I'd paid $28,000 per year for, but couldn't find a job immediately. "Just until I get on my feet, Dad," she'd said. So I covered her apartment rent, her car payment, her groceries. Temporary help for my little girl. Then came Bryce in early 2020. He was charming enough at first, a contractor who seemed to genuinely care about Allie. When they decided to get married that fall, and his family couldn't afford their share of the wedding costs, I quietly covered the difference, $22,000 for one day, but it was my daughter's special day. The house purchase in 2019 seemed logical. Young couples needed help getting started. Everyone said so. The $85,000 down payment came from my retirement account, money Melody and I had saved for our golden years. It's an investment, I told myself. Family helping family. Then came the monthly support that started small and grew like cancer. First just the mortgage payment when Bryce's work got slow, then utilities when they had an unexpected expense, then groceries because money was tight. Before I knew it, I was transferring $300 every month to keep them afloat while living on my Social Security and watching my savings disappear. The signs of Bryce's gambling problem had been there for months. Phone calls he'd take in another room, speaking in hushed, urgent tones. Mood swings that corresponded with football seasons and basketball playoffs. The way he'd get defensive when I asked about his job search, always having excuses for why this interview fell through or that opportunity didn't pan out. But I'd ignored the signs because I wanted to believe my daughter had married a decent man, because admitting the truth would have meant admitting I'd wasted $405,000 on people who saw me as nothing more than a convenient ATM. Desert Inn Motel sat on the outskirts of town, a low building with faded paint and a neon sign that flickered intermittently. The kind of place where people went when they had nowhere else to go. The irony wasn't lost on me. A man who'd owned his home for 15 years, checking into a $65 per night motel because his own family had made him unwelcome in the house he'd paid for. The room was small but clean. A bed, a chair, a tiny table by the window that looked out over the parking lot. I set my suitcase on the luggage rack and sat heavily on the mattress edge, feeling every one of my 62 years. The silence was different here. Not the comfortable quiet of my own home, but the hollow emptiness of a temporary space. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through the contacts. Bank numbers, insurance companies, credit card services. Numbers I knew by heart from 35 years in aerospace finance and 2 years of retirement planning. Tomorrow was Sunday, but some things could still be done. Some calls could still be made. Some financial relationships could still be severed. I opened my laptop on the small table and logged into my online banking. Account balances glowed on the screen, checking, savings, what remained of my retirement accounts after 5 years of supporting 2 adults who'd never learned to support themselves. The cursor blinked in the search bar, waiting for me to decide what came next. But I already knew. I'd known the moment Bryce demanded I serve him like a butler and Allie stood by and watched it happen. It was time to cut off the money. Sunday morning arrived gray and overcast, unusual for Arizona, fitting my mood perfectly. I spread my paperwork across the motel table like a general planning a campaign. Bank statements, insurance policies, legal documents, everything organized, everything within reach. 35 years of engineering had taught me that successful projects required careful planning and systematic execution. The first call went to Wells Fargo at exactly 8:00 a.m. Sunday banking was limited, but automated systems never slept. "Good morning, Mr. Martinez," the representative said after I navigated through the phone tree. "How can I help you today? I need to cancel the automatic mortgage payment for 847 Desert View Drive, the account ending in 4729. A pause. Computer keys clicking. "Sir, I show that payment has been active for 5 years. Are you sure you want to discontinue it?" "Completely sure. The payment of $2,100 monthly. May I ask the reason for the change?" "The homeowners no longer qualify for my financial assistance." I kept my voice professional, businesslike. This wasn't emotional. It was a rational business decision based on changed circumstances. More clicking. "Very well, Mr. Martinez, the automatic payment will be canceled effective immediately. You should receive written confirmation within 3 business days." The second call was easier. State Farm had been insuring both their cars on my policy for 4 years. Bryce's F-150, Allie's Honda Civic. $320 every month for vehicles I never drove, coverage for accidents I'd never cause, comprehensive and collision on cars I'd never benefit from. "I need to remove 2 vehicles from my policy," I told the agent. "My daughter and son-in-law will need to establish their own coverage. When would you like this change to take effect?" "Today. Immediately." The credit cards took longer. Allie was an authorized user on 3 of my accounts: Visa, MasterCard, and the store card from Home Depot. I'd been paying an average of $800 monthly on balances I'd never created, purchases I'd never made. Hardware store runs for Bryce's side projects that never seemed to generate any income. Electronics, restaurant meals, gas station charges at all hours of the night. Mr. Martinez, removing authorized users will require them to apply for their own credit, the Visa representative explained patiently. Any outstanding balances will remain your responsibility, but they won't be able to make new charges. I understand. Remove them immediately. All of them. Each call felt like lifting a weight from my shoulders. 35 years of aerospace engineering had taught me the importance of systems and processes, proper procedures, documentation. Everything I was doing was completely within my rights, legally sound, and financially necessary. The utility companies were next. Arizona Public Service, Southwest Gas, Cox Communications. All billing to my credit card for services at a house I no longer lived in, for people who'd made it clear I wasn't welcome unless I accepted the role of unpaid servant. I need to remove my payment method from account 847 Desert View Drive, I told each customer service representative. The residents will need to establish their own billing arrangements. By noon, I'd made 12 calls. Mortgage payments stopped, insurance canceled, credit cards blocked, utilities transferred back to the residents' responsibility. The automatic transfers that had been bleeding my retirement accounts dry for 5 years. All of it ended with polite conversations and confirmation numbers. I sat back in the cheap motel chair and looked at my notes. Confirmation numbers, reference codes, effective dates. The paper trail of financial independence. It reminded me of project documentation at Lockheed. Every decision backed up with proper authorization and clear timelines. My phone sat silent on the table. No missed calls, no urgent messages. They didn't know yet. Probably wouldn't know until Tuesday when the first payment bounced, when the first bill arrived with their names on it instead of mine. But they would know soon enough. I decided to take a drive through downtown Scottsdale, past the places where Melody and I used to go. The art galleries we'd browse on Sunday afternoons, the restaurant where we'd celebrated my promotion to senior engineer, the park where we'd talked about retirement dreams that never included supporting grown children indefinitely. At a red light, I found myself thinking about Bryce's gambling problem. The signs had been obvious once I knew what to look for. The mood swings during football season, the way he'd check his phone obsessively during games, the mysterious work meetings that happened at odd hours, usually corresponding with major sporting events. I'd started paying closer attention over the past few months, noticed how he'd disappear into the garage with his phone when certain games were on, heard him talking in hushed, urgent tones about covering spreads and sure things, saw the betting apps on his phone screen when he thought no one was looking. The unemployment had made it worse. With no job to go to, he'd had all day to research bets, to convince himself that the next game would be the one that turned everything around. Classic addiction behavior, chasing losses with bigger bets, always certain that victory was just one play away. And I'd been funding it. Every month, that $100 transfer had been enabling his addiction while he sat in my chair, drank my beer, and demanded I serve him like hired help. The realization made my stomach turn. My phone buzzed, text message from an unknown number. Mr. Martinez, this is Desert Financial Credit Union. We have an inquiry about a loan application from Bryce Sullivan listing your property as collateral. Please call us at your earliest convenience. I stared at the message, feeling a cold fury settle in my chest. He'd been trying to use my house as collateral for loans. My house, the one Melody and I had bought with our savings, the one I'd been paying the mortgage on for 5 years while he lived there rent-free. I saved the message and made a note to call them first thing Monday morning, but I already knew what I'd find. Bryce had probably been shopping around for loans, using my property address, maybe even forging documents to make it look like he had some legal claim to the house. The drive back to the motel gave me time to think about what came next. The financial cuts were just the beginning. If Bryce was desperate enough to try fraudulent loan applications, if he was willing to risk my credit and my property to fund his gambling addiction, then this was going to get much worse before it got better. But I was ready for whatever came next. I'd spent 35 years solving complex engineering problems, managing million-dollar aerospace projects, dealing with difficult people and impossible deadlines. 2 ungrateful adults who'd never learned to take care of themselves? That was just another project to manage. And unlike them, I knew how to plan for success. The week passed quietly for me, but apparently not for them. I'd settled into a routine at Desert Inn. Coffee from the lobby, breakfast at the diner down the street, long walks around Scottsdale's quiet neighborhoods where retirees like me tended their desert gardens and worked on classic cars in their garages. My phone accumulated missed calls like a collection I had no interest in starting. By Wednesday, there were 14 messages. By Friday, 26. I listened to them in chronological order, watching the progression from confusion to anger to desperation, like stages of grief played out in voicemail. The first few were almost casual. Allie asking if there was some kind of banking error with the mortgage payment. Bryce leaving brief, annoyed messages about the car insurance lapsing, still talking like this was some kind of misunderstanding that would get sorted out. But by the middle of the week, panic had crept in. "Dad, what the hell is going on?" Allie's voice cracked with frustration. "The bank says you stopped the automatic payment. They want the full amount by Friday or they'll start foreclosure proceedings. Call me back. Now." Bryce's messages grew increasingly aggressive. "Caleb, you need to fix this right now. I've got people asking questions about my insurance. The credit cards aren't working. You're making us look like deadbeats, and I'm not going to stand for it." The later calls bordered on begging. Allie crying, promising they'd work something out if I just called them back. Bryce trying a different approach, claiming he'd been too harsh and wanted to make things right. I deleted each message after listening, feeling nothing but mild curiosity about their growing desperation. Thursday morning brought a knock at my motel room door. Through the peephole, I saw them both. Allie in a wrinkled sweater, her hair unwashed, Bryce in work clothes that looked like he'd slept in them, both looking like they'd aged 5 years in a week. I opened the door but didn't invite them in. "Dad." Allie's eyes were red-rimmed, her usual composure completely shattered. "We need to talk." "About what?" Bryce pushed forward, his face flushed with anger and desperation. "About the fact that you're trying to ruin our lives over some stupid argument about beer. About the fact that Desert Financial called about some loan application I never made. That caught my attention." "You never made a loan application?" "I mean, I looked into it, asked some questions, but I never actually applied for anything." His eyes wouldn't meet mine. "They're saying you told them I was committing fraud. I told them you have no legal claim to my property because you don't." Allie grabbed Bryce's arm as he stepped closer to the door. "Dad, please, we can work this out. Bryce was wrong to talk to you that way. We both were. But you can't just destroy our credit, our housing, our whole lives. You gave me an ultimatum," I reminded her. "Do what Bryce says or get out." Those were your exact words. "I didn't mean it like that." "Yes, you did." I looked at my daughter, this woman I'd raised alone after Melody died, who'd never wanted for anything because I'd sacrificed my own retirement security. "You meant every word. You just didn't expect me to choose option 2. Bryce tried a different approach, his voice artificially calm. "Look, we all said things we didn't mean. But you're talking about our home, our credit rating, our whole future. You can't just pull the rug out like this over hurt feelings." "Hurt feelings?" The words came out sharper than I intended. "You demanded I serve you like a butler in my own house. You've been gambling away money I've been sending you for years, and you tried to use my property as loan collateral without my permission." "This isn't about hurt feelings, Bryce. This is about respect, responsibility, and basic human decency." His fake composure cracked completely. "You crazy old—" "I can call the police if you keep raising your voice," I interrupted. "This is private property, and you're disturbing other guests." They stared at me, probably seeing me clearly for the first time in years. Not the soft-hearted father and ATM, not the convenient funding source they could manipulate with guilt and family obligations. Just a man who'd finally learned to say no. "What do you want from us?" Allie asked quietly. "I want you to grow up, both of you. Figure out how to pay your own bills, handle your own responsibilities, treat people with respect. Basic adult behavior." Bryce grabbed Allie's elbow. "Come on, he's lost his mind. We'll figure this out ourselves." They walked back to their car, Bryce's swagger replaced by worried hunching, Allie looking back over her shoulder like she was seeing a stranger. Which, in a way, she was. The pushover father who'd enabled their lifestyle for 5 years was gone. This was who I'd been before grief and guilt had turned me into an ATM with legs. 3 months later, I stood on the balcony of my new condo at Desert Ridge Golf Community, watching the sunrise over the Superstition Mountains. The moving truck had delivered the last of my belongings from storage yesterday. My 1969 Camaro sat in the attached garage, finally getting the restoration attention it deserved. The monthly condo fee included golf privileges, a fitness center, and a community workshop. At 62, I was one of the younger residents, but I'd found my people, retired engineers, former military, successful professionals who understood the value of hard work and mutual respect. My phone buzzed with a text from Allie. "Dad, I'm 6 months into counseling and learning a lot about healthy relationships. Bryce and I are divorced. He left town when the gambling debts got too serious. Could we try having coffee sometime? I'd like to earn your trust back, one conversation at a time." I smiled, looking out at the perfectly maintained golf course where an elderly couple was practicing their putting. I'd donated the Scottsdale house to Veterans Housing Initiative after Allie and Bryce lost it to foreclosure. 3 families of veterans lived there now, people who understood sacrifice and service. I typed back, "Coffee sounds good." Saturday morning, 10 a.m. at the diner on Main Street. Her response came immediately, "I'll be there. And Dad, thank you for not giving up on me completely." The sun was climbing higher, promising another perfect Arizona day. In the distance, I could hear laughter from the community center, retirees enjoying their Friday morning coffee social, justice served, dignity preserved, and maybe, just maybe, a daughter ready to rebuild our relationship on mutual respect instead of financial dependency. Sometimes the best revenge is simply letting people face the consequences they created for themselves. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, they learn something from those consequences. As for Bryce, word around Scottsdale was he'd fled to Vegas, still chasing that one big win that would solve all his problems. Some people never learn, but that wasn't my problem anymore.